The new neighbor and the tension begins. The sun had just started to dip behind the neat row of identical two-story houses when Marcus Williams parked his black SUV in the driveway of his new home. It was quiet, too quiet. The air carried that sterile, picture-perfect feeling of a neighborhood, where the grass was always cut at the exact same height. The fences were all painted the same shade of beige, and where people smiled through their teeth. For Marcus, this was supposed to be a fresh start. After years of hard work as a software engineer, he finally bought his dream house in a prestigious suburban community. He had no idea that this place came with something far more intense than lawn inspections and HOA newsletters. It came with Karen Thompson. She noticed him the moment he stepped out of the car. Standing on her porch across the street, clutching her HOA clipboard like a sheriff's badge, Karen squinted at Marcus as though she'd spotted a trespasser. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, her lips pursed in judgment. "New neighbor," she muttered to herself, watching every movement as Marcus unloaded boxes. Within 10 minutes she crossed the street. "Excuse me," she called out sharply. "You can't leave boxes on the sidewalk. It's against HOA policy. Section 4B, line 2. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, hi, I'm Marcus. Just moving in. Don't worry, I'll clear everything up in a few minutes." Karen's eyes narrowed. "We take neighborhood standards very seriously here. I hope you understand." She gave a forced smile, then slowly scanned his car, his clothes, even his shoes. It wasn't a welcome. It was an inspection. The first few days were uneventful. At least on the surface. Marcus kept to himself, working from home, greeting passing neighbors with a friendly wave. Most waved back politely. Some just stared a little longer than necessary. Then the letters started. A yellow envelope tucked under his doormat. HOA notice, trash can placement violation. The next day, HOA notice, lawn not trimmed to regulation height. Then Joe notice, front porch light too bright after 10 p.m. Marcus couldn't help but chuckle at first. They're really serious about rules here, he told himself. But after the 5th notice in a week, the smile faded. Someone was clearly targeting him. One evening, as Marcus was working late in his home office, he noticed something strange on his security camera. A shadowy figure moved near his mailbox, spray can in hand. Marcus switched on the porch light just in time to catch the face. It was Brad Thompson, Karen's teenage son. The boy froze like a deer in headlights, then bolted into the darkness. Marcus rushed outside, but Brad was gone. On the mailbox was a fresh streak of silver paint. "Seriously," Marcus muttered. He saved the footage onto his hard drive. He wasn't looking for trouble, but this crossed a line. The next morning, Karen appeared at his door uninvited, pretending to be concerned. "Hi, Marcus," she said sweetly. "I noticed some vandalism on your property. This neighborhood used to be so safe, you know. It's a shame when new elements bring problems." Marcus stared at her, speechless. She was implying he brought trouble? He forced a polite smile. "Yeah, someone was messing around. Don't worry, I have cameras." For the briefest second, her face twitched. Then she smiled wider. Good, cameras are useful." She turned and walked away briskly. Over the next few days, Marcus began observing carefully. Brad hung around with a group of teens late at night. Spray cans, skateboards, cigarette smoke, not exactly harmless mischief. One night, Marcus turned on his camera feed and saw Brad again, this time tagging a neighbor's fence, laughing with his friends. Marcus quietly recorded every second. He had evidence now. And he wasn't going to let Karen's intimidation tactics work on him. But in a neighborhood where appearances mattered more than truth, exposing the truth would ignite a fire he didn't yet see coming. Karen wasn't just nosy. She was powerful in this HOA, and when powerful people feel threatened, they strike back. This was just the beginning. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, the glow of his laptop illuminating the tense set of his jaw. He'd watched the security footage countless times, each replay more infuriating than the last. Brad Thompson, Karen's golden boy, was clearly the culprit behind the vandalism, caught in the act spraying graffiti on the mailboxes, smirking like he owned the street. He clenched his fists. This is wrong. It has to stop. Marcus wasn't the type to escalate things unnecessarily. But living in a neighborhood dominated by HOA politics meant that power often overshadowed justice. Karen had already sent him warnings for the most trivial infractions, and now her son was out here breaking the rules without consequences. The situation demanded action. He drafted a detailed email to the HOA board, attaching every clip from his security camera. Time-stamped evidence, clear images of Brad's vandalism, the works. Marcus's hands trembled slightly, not out of fear, but anticipation. He knew this wouldn't be easy. Karen was influential, feared by neighbors for her relentless enforcement of HOA rules. The next morning, he sent it. By mid-afternoon, Marcus's inbox pinged with responses. One board member expressed concern, another praised Marcus for being diligent. But Karen's reply was immediate and venomous. Your accusations are completely false and slanderous. This is harassment. I will not allow you to defame my son. You should be ashamed. Marcus stared at the screen. She didn't deny it. She accused him. The audacity made his blood boil. Later that evening, he saw Karen pacing in her driveway. Her gaze kept flicking toward his house, calculating, measuring. The tension in the air was suffocating. Marcus knew she was plotting something, but what? He didn't have to wait long. The following day, a neighbor came to him quietly. Marcus, are you sure about this? Karen is tricky. She has ways to make you look bad. Marcus nodded, determined. I have proof. I'm not afraid of her. That night, he checked his security cameras again. Brad, now emboldened, attempted another act of mischief, trying to tamper with Marcus's mailbox. Marcus recorded every second and called the local HOA office the next morning. This time, he requested an emergency HOA meeting. The meeting was tense from the start. Marcus presented the evidence in front of the board. The clips played, showing Brad's vandalism. Graffiti on fences, damaged mailboxes, careless destruction of neighbors' property. Marcus spoke calmly but firmly. This isn't personal. It's about accountability. Rules exist for everyone. Karen's reaction was explosive. She slammed her hand on the table, standing abruptly. This is outrageous. You have no right to target my son. You're harassing us. The room froze. A few board members tried to mediate, but Karen's voice rose, sharp and unrelenting. He's a minor. You have no proof he did anything intentionally. You're fabricating this. Marcus stayed calm, letting the footage speak for itself. The neighbors who had attended the meeting began whispering. The room shifted uncomfortably. Karen's authority was being questioned in front of witnesses, something she had never tolerated before. Brad, sitting silently in the corner, avoided eye contact. His facade of defiance was cracking. For the first time, he seemed aware of the consequences. Karen, sensing her grip slipping, tried another tactic: intimidation. She leaned close to Marcus and whispered, "You think you can destroy my family? Watch your back." Marcus simply recorded her threat discreetly. "I'm not destroying anyone. I'm showing the truth," he replied evenly, his voice steady despite the tension. The board took a brief recess. In the hall, neighbors approached Marcus privately, offering support. A few even admitted they had witnessed Brad's vandalism, but had been too scared to speak up. Marcus felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone. When the meeting resumed, Karen doubled down, but the evidence was undeniable. Board members began to discuss disciplinary action. Marcus realized that this wasn't just about proving Brad's misbehavior anymore. It was about exposing the toxic environment Karen had fostered in the neighborhood. The air was thick with suspense. Karen's face flushed, her usual confidence replaced with panic. For the first time, she seemed vulnerable, and Marcus could almost sense the storm that was about to erupt. By the end of the meeting, it was clear. Brad's actions could not be ignored. Karen's influence was being challenged publicly. Marcus had taken the first step in exposing the truth, but he knew this was far from over. Walking home later that evening, Marcus paused under a street lamp, the cool night air brushing his face. He reviewed the day in his mind, the whispers of neighbors, the tense stares, Karen's fury. One thing was certain. This confrontation had only just begun, and Karen would retaliate. Marcus clenched his fists, determination burning in his chest. Bring it on. Little did he know, the next move would push Karen into a panic she could never recover from, and escalate the neighborhood war in ways no one could predict. The morning sun shone bright, but the Thompson residence seemed darker than ever. Inside, Karen Thompson was pacing like a caged lion, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor in a staccato rhythm of fury. She had spent the entire night stewing over the HOA meeting, replaying the images of her son caught on Marcus's security cameras. Each frame burned into her mind, a direct assault on her carefully curated world of control and perfection. "This can't be happening," she muttered, throwing a pen across the room. "He can't get away with this." Brad, her son, sat quietly on the couch, headphones on, pretending not to exist. But Karen's piercing glare made it impossible. "Did you see what he did to us?" she hissed. "Do you know how much trouble you've caused?" Brad shrugged, trying to downplay the incident, but Karen wasn't buying it. She knew what Marcus had. Evidence. Damning evidence. And she wouldn't let it destroy her family image or her power in the HOA. By noon, Karen had already begun her retaliation campaign. It started small. Passive-aggressive notes slipped under Marcus's door, complaints filed over trivial violations, and whispers to neighbors suggesting Marcus was somehow unstable or confrontational. But small actions weren't enough. She needed to escalate. She needed to strike fear directly. That evening, Marcus noticed something unusual. Trash appeared on his lawn, bags torn open, empty soda cans, even a few broken garden tools. He looked around, suspicion rising. And then he saw her, a neighbor at a distance, retreating with a sly smile. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Karen was framing him. Again. The breaking point came 2 nights later. Marcus had just settled on his porch with a cup of tea when he noticed flashing red and blue lights down the street. His heart sank. 2 police cars rolled up. Officers stepped out, their expressions professional but cautious. "Marcus Williams?" one of them asked. "Yes," he said calmly, masking the rising dread. "What's going on?" The officer glanced at his partner. "There's a 911 call claiming you threatened a woman and her son. Is that true?" Marcus froze, realizing instantly what had happened. Karen had called 911, fabricating a story to make it seem like he was dangerous. But Marcus wasn't intimidated. He calmly retrieved his laptop and tablet, opening the security footage that had recorded the entire series of events. "This is the truth," he said evenly. "You'll see there's been no threat, no harassment. This is Karen Thompson's son, caught vandalizing property. She's trying to pin something on me because she's angry I exposed the behavior." The officers watched silently as the footage played. Every frame confirmed Marcus's story. The vandalism, the sneaky approaches, the messages, everything. Karen, realizing she might have overplayed her hand, appeared at the scene, waving her arms, voice trembling. "This is ridiculous." He was menacing. He... The officers raised hands to calm her. Marcus stayed calm. Every motion recorded, every word noted. Word spread quickly in the neighborhood. People began talking, watching, and whispering. Karen's carefully built image of control was cracking. She had underestimated Marcus's patience, his level-headedness, and his determination to expose the truth. Brad, meanwhile, was growing uneasy. He hadn't expected Marcus to stay so composed, to remain polite, even under direct accusation and attack. For the first time, he saw the consequences of his actions, not just for himself, but for his mother and the image she had projected for years. Karen's panic became palpable. She had played the intimidation card, but now the neighborhood was watching her. Marcus had turned the tables, and she hated it. As the night fell, Marcus sat in his living room, reviewing the footage once again. His phone buzzed, a neighbor reaching out with support. Another email from a board member asking for an official review. The tide was shifting. Karen sat behind her curtains, watching the glow from Marcus's house. The rage in her eyes was unmistakable. She had lost control, and the realization was bitter. She had struck first, trying to scare him, but Marcus had not flinched. He had not cracked. In a moment of quiet reflection, Marcus sipped his tea and thought, "This is just the beginning. But I am ready." Outside, the suburban street seemed calm, almost serene. But behind closed doors, a storm was brewing, a storm fueled by anger, fear, and the unyielding desire for control. And Karen Thompson was at the center of it. Panicked, plotting, desperate, the war was no longer silent. It had begun in full force. The HOA meeting room was packed. Chairs creaked under the weight of tense neighbors, whispers filling the air like electricity before a storm. Marcus stood at the front, laptop open, heart steady but mind racing. Today wasn't about politeness. Today was about truth. Karen Thompson arrived last, her posture rigid, clutching a thick folder of documents like a shield. Her eyes darted around, calculating, measuring. Every glance was meant to intimidate. But Marcus noticed something new. The room wasn't turning toward her the way it usually did. Murmurs of doubt floated among the neighbors. They were beginning to see cracks in her armor. "Let's get started," the HOA president said, trying to maintain order. "We're here to review the recent complaints and evidence." Marcus stepped forward. "Thank you. I'm here to show evidence of repeated violations committed by Brad Thompson." He clicked the laptop. The screen lit up, revealing video clips. Brad tagging fences, vandalizing mailboxes, tampering with mail. The images were clear, undeniable. Karen's face shifted from anger to panic. This is ridiculous. You're targeting my son. You're fabricating this. Marcus held up a hand. "Please let the evidence speak." The room fell silent. Every neighbor leaned forward. The sound of quiet gasps punctuated the clips. For the first time, Karen didn't have control. The narrative she had carefully built was cracking. Board members began to murmur among themselves. One, a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses, whispered to another, "We can't ignore this. The footage is clear. He's telling the truth." Another board member nodded reluctantly. "Karen's behavior has been aggressive. Perhaps we've overlooked the pattern for too long." Karen slammed her hand on the table, voice rising. "You're all betraying me. This is a personal attack. He's trying to ruin my family." At that moment, Brad spoke up, his voice shaky but audible. I did it. I vandalized the mailboxes. I thought it was just harmless fun. I didn't mean..." Karen's face went white, her hand gripping her folder so tightly her knuckles turned pale. The room was frozen. Brad's confession validated everything Marcus had said. There was no denying the truth now. Marcus didn't gloat. He stayed calm, letting the moment do the work. "Thank you, Brad. I hope this helps everyone understand that accountability is for all members of the community, regardless of who they are." Karen tried one last attempt at intimidation, standing up abruptly. "You think you can humiliate me here? You think..." But the board president raised a hand. "Karen Thompson, your influence in the HOA is being temporarily suspended pending review. Your actions have endangered the community's trust." The room erupted with whispers. Neighbors exchanged glances, some nodding in approval, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Karen, once the queen of this neighborhood, was now cornered, her power stripped by the truth she tried to bury. As the meeting concluded, Marcus packed up his laptop. Several neighbors approached him quietly, offering apologies for earlier support of Karen or gratitude for standing up. "You didn't just protect yourself," one whispered. "You protected all of us." Outside, Karen stormed to her car, fists clenched, muttering threats under her breath. Marcus caught a glimpse of her face, furious, humiliated, powerless. The battle wasn't entirely over, but the tide had turned. Brad hung back, his shame evident. He avoided his mother's glare, clearly realizing the consequences of his actions. Marcus felt a strange mix of relief and resolve. He had won this battle without stooping to Karen's level, proving that dignity and truth could outweigh intimidation and fear. Walking home, Marcus reflected on the day. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it was starting to recognize the dangers of unchecked power. Karen Thompson's reign of fear had been exposed, and for the first time in years, the residents could breathe freely. He paused under a street lamp, thinking about the journey. This is what standing up for truth looks like. Calm, steady, undeniable. Behind him, across the street, Karen's house sat dark, windows shut tight. She would recover, no doubt. But for now, Marcus knew one undeniable fact. He had changed the neighborhood forever. And Karen Thompson would never see herself the same way again. For Marcus, the message was clear. Courage and evidence can topple even the most imposing forces. And sometimes, simply standing firm is enough to spark a revolution. The first rays of dawn filtered through the perfectly trimmed hedges of the neighborhood, casting long shadows over the rows of identical houses. To the casual eye, everything seemed calm, peaceful, even idyllic. But the events of the past weeks had left invisible scars on the community, particularly on the Thompson family and their neighbors. For Marcus Williams, however, the day carried a quiet sense of triumph. Sitting on his porch with a steaming cup of coffee, he watched neighbors walk their dogs, exchange smiles, and wave politely as they passed. For the first time since moving in, Marcus felt truly at home. The HOA board had taken swift action following the explosive meeting. Brad Thompson was assigned community service, attending a series of neighborhood restoration projects to repair the damage he had caused. Counseling sessions were also mandated to help him understand the consequences of reckless behavior. The once spoiled teen now had responsibilities that demanded accountability, lessons he could no longer ignore. Karen Thompson, on the other hand, was facing legal consequences. Filing a false 911 report and attempting to intimidate neighbors with fabricated claims had brought the authorities' attention. She was ordered to pay fines, attend mandatory community mediation, and was officially removed from her HOA position indefinitely. Her aura of control, which had once dominated every corner of the neighborhood, was shattered. Neighbors began to speak differently of the Thompsons. Karen's attempts to manipulate opinion no longer worked. Her reputation was tarnished. For the first time, the neighborhood saw her not as the enforcer of rules, but as a figure whose unchecked authority had threatened the peace and safety of everyone. Meanwhile, Marcus became something of a quiet hero. He had never sought recognition, but the community could no longer ignore his courage. He hadn't yelled, hadn't threatened, hadn't stooped to Karen's level. Instead, he had stood firm, relied on facts, and let evidence speak louder than intimidation. A few neighbors approached him, offering thanks or sharing their relief. "It's good to know someone will stand up for what's right," said an elderly man, tipping his hat. Marcus smiled, feeling the weight of weeks of tension finally lift. Inside her house, Karen sat behind curtained windows, staring at Marcus across the street. Her anger had cooled into simmering frustration. She had lost control, and the neighborhood had moved on without her. Brad, sitting silently beside her, avoided her eyes, his earlier defiance replaced with reflection and, perhaps, the beginnings of remorse. Marcus, noticing the Thompson house from his porch, didn't feel triumphant over them personally. Instead, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Truth had prevailed. Fairness had won, and the community had learned a lesson about unchecked power and intimidation. As he leaned back in his chair, the neighborhood around him seemed transformed, not by laws or HOA rules, but by the courage to stand for what was right. The message was simple, yet profound. Even in the face of intimidation and abuse of power, integrity and evidence can create lasting change. In the weeks that followed, Marcus helped initiate reforms within the HOA. Clearer policies were drafted to prevent abuse of authority, ensuring that no single individual could wield influence in a way that threatened others' safety or peace. Meetings became more transparent, complaints required documentation, and neighbors were encouraged to speak up without fear. The neighborhood, once stifled by fear and whispered gossip, slowly began to breathe again. Children played in the yards without worry. Neighbors chatted over fences, and Marcus's presence, quiet but firm, became a stabilizing force. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Marcus sat on his porch again. The glow of the streetlights reflected softly on his calm expression. Karen Thompson was gone from power. Brad Thompson was learning accountability, and the neighborhood had emerged stronger and fairer than before. Marcus took a deep breath, savoring the moment. He had not only protected himself, but had also set a precedent that truth, courage, and dignity could overcome fear and manipulation. And for the first time since he arrived, he felt an unshakable sense of peace in his home. In the quiet distance, Karen's curtains remained drawn. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The battle was over, the lessons were learned, and the neighborhood would never forget that one man's resolve can change an entire community. And as Marcus watched the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, he knew that he had won far more than a neighborhood dispute. He had helped restore justice and balance where it mattered most.